Parents have it tough. Their kids are always changing and they have to pivot and change gears along with their kids. As the kids grow, the hats the parents have to wear will change. And so in this video, I'm going to talk about the 4 different hats to wear and approximately when to wear them. Of course, exceptions always apply. So every child's stage is different in their development. And so these are general rules and general ideas that I want to share with everybody. Now, the reason I want to talk about the 4 stages of parenting is because at a recent business trip, I learned about how a person really struggled with their daughter transitioning from being a teenager to an adult, and how the parent essentially struggled from going from stage 2 to 3 to 4. Once that parent was able to make the adjustments, it worked out perfectly for them. So basically, this video is largely inspired by listening to that person's story. The first stage is what I call the slave stage. It's the most tiring phase, and it involves children who are 0 to 5 years old. It's the most tiring because it's the most physically demanding. It involves diaper changing, it involves burping a child after they nurse or eat. It involves a lot of insomnia because a child may wake up in the middle of the night, whether they are a newborn or whether they are a preschooler. There are different things that will wake them up. However, this stage is also extremely important because it shapes what we call the schemas in the brain. And what that is it burns neural pathways into their brains on good behavior. This phase really forms character. So I like to use my own example to illustrate this. When my oldest daughter was being sleep trained, one thing that we had to do was put her down to go to sleep by herself in her own room. And she quickly realized this, right? By this time she was able to look around, she recognized our faces, and she was more or less able to prop herself up and just look around. And so the proper way to do this is to put your child down and let them cry it out. Of course, there's always exceptions for this, but most children are able to just cry it out and get used to the practice that, hey, this is bedtime and I'll go to sleep. Now, one of the worst things that you can do in this time period is if you put your child down to sleep and they're crying and you go in at random points of their crying and you hold them and you distract them and you interact with them. If you sustain this type of pattern where every time they cry you go in, whether it's a long time, they cry for 5 minutes, you go in, or they cry for 10 seconds, you go in, what this child develops in their neural pathways, in their brain, is the persistence of expressing negative emotion to get attention. And this child, when he or she grows up, is going to be a very persistent and negative person. And this is not the type of thing you want in your child. So this stage is very important in shaping the mind of the child. And so essentially, this is when the subconscious is being formed in the child. And emotions at this stage dominate. They don't really have a rational mind yet, which is kind of like the outer part of the brain. The more inner part, that's where it's being formed. So at this stage, it is essential to encourage curiosity. It is important to teach etiquette and proper behavior and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, so that your child is able to read your facial expressions and know what is proper behavior or not. Because believe me, they will test you. The second stage is the helper stage, and it's the sweetest phase of the 4. Parents in the helper stage, their children are usually between the ages 6 to 13. And this is a stage where you get to do a lot of things together. As a parent, you'll be a chauffeur for your child. You'll take them around here and there. You'll also be doing a lot of tutoring work. You'll also do a lot of homework with them. You'll also have to be their cheerleader and encourage them when they're depressed, when they're down, when they're disappointed, and give them a positive outlook in their life. Also, you have to be a collaborator where you work on things together. So at home, when we got to clean the house, we get the kids involved as well. Every kid has something that's set for their ability. There are different things that are suited for their level. Of course, different cultures have different norms of what is normal behavior for a child. So in some families in China, some kids actually start cooking for the whole family at ages 8 or 9, right? That can actually be quite a normal thing. At this stage, you also have to train your child. You have to train them on how to do things, how to cook, how to clean up, how to do a variety of things. But essentially, this is the stage where intelligence has been formed and personality is also settling in. So by 9, personality has pretty much settled in. By 12, it's permanent. The next stage after this is what I call the coaching stage. Now the coaching stage, parents often struggle with. When I was teaching high schools, a lot of parents came in and said, I don't know how to deal with my kid. My kids change so quickly. I don't know what's going on with them. And the reality is because they no longer need your help as much. They kind of figure out the world already, but not exactly. So what coaches do is they allow the child to bounce ideas off of them for clarity. The coach is still the expert in life or different things, but at the same time, a child does not need to be told on what to do. So this stage is usually between ages 14 to 18. And for parents, it's important to remember that there is no shame in being a coach because every great person had a coach. For example, Michael Jordan, his coach was Phil Jackson, who was also known as the Zen Master. Now, Michael, at the apex of his dominance, could beat anybody on the court. But Phil Jackson pushed him to take the next step and the next step by recommending books for him to read, by encouraging him, by giving him further clarity on how to become great. So there was nothing wrong with being a coach. It's just a different stage from being a helper. And a lot of parents actually struggle with letting go and becoming that coach. If you're a parent, one thing you can do is to remember yourself at this phase. Because at this stage, when you're 14 to 18, a lot of things you haven't really quite figured out yet, but you kind of have an idea of how it's done as well. So you really need people to give you guidance, to bounce ideas off of. So don't be overprotective. Let them learn from their mistakes. Now, the last stage is what I call the consultant stage, which is where you treat them as equals by being a consultant. At this point in their lives, when they're 19 and older, they are the expert of their own lives. They know what's going on. It is the most worrisome phase, but it's also the phase that can afford you the most freedom. It's the most worrisome because it's kind of out of your control at this point. There's not much else you can do. They're legal adults in the global West. At the same time, it's also the most free stage. So if you've been doing well in the previous stages and you've been building up that relationship and you've been encouraging that autonomy of theirs, by this stage, they should be fully functioning adults and that you're free to do whatever you want to do and that they're free to do whatever that they want to do. But at the same time, that parent and child relationship will not change if you've handled it correctly. Now, I call this the consultant stage because in a working relationship, the consultant is often someone that an expert can turn to. What's your thought on this? And what we found in the sociological research is that parental influence in a child's life, while it will diminish, it does not change. So pretty much parents, until you're no longer around, you will have an impact in your child's life by what you say, by your opinion, even though you may think you don't. However, you must also realize that between the ages 19 to 27, an adult's brain is actually still being consolidated. So the left and right brain still hasn't fully made the connections yet. And that's why, in a sense, youth are easily swayed by emotions or too much logic. And there comes a point in time where you need to practice patience until the point in time arrives where both the left and right brain has made thorough connections and that the brain is really fully developed. And so this is a stage where your child may ask you for input, where you should only say things if you must, where you are no longer technically responsible for them anymore, but at the same time, your heartstrings are still attached. So the 4 stages of parenting is what I call the slave stage, the helper stage, the coaching stage, and the consulting stage. And these 4 stages you have to be cognizant of in order for you to wear different hats at different points in time. So essentially, remember to foster autonomy, your relationship, and that's it. That's the 4 stages of parenting that I've got for you. I'd actually be really interested to know your experience on how you've navigated different stages of parenting. Whether you're a parent or you're a child that's facing these different forms of parenting, leave a comment below and let me know what your experience is. And if you have any questions, be sure to drop them because I'd be glad to answer them. As always, if you like the video, like it and share it. And if you haven't done so already, please click the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you receive updates on future videos. Take care, everybody.